Hello and welcome to Assemblies of the World with me, Anna Isabel. And I am delighted because my guest is John Gilbert, who is going to talk to us about a rather pesky subject, council tax. Hello, John.
Hello, Anna, and I'm glad you picked up the Cornish word for a nuisance again, which is pesky.
I didn't know that was a Cornish word.
Yes.
Oh, I love it. Brilliant. Okay, well, I've been thinking about where to begin with this, and I thought it would be a good idea to hear from you about this notion that's floating around that local councils are actually corporations. So, is this true? And if it is, what does it mean?
Okay. When you're talking about incorporated, because a corporation can be just a number of people getting together in cooperation. So, for instance, if you talk about the community assemblies, we've got 8 other organisations that work with us, so that we are a corporation. So we're cooperating together, if you like. I want to put it a slightly different way. But when you're incorporated, then there's a slight difference there in that they have a number, which you could normally go onto the government site and pick up the company that's registered as a company business, as a limited company. And you can normally go onto Dun and Bradstreet and pick up an incorporated number from there. The problem that we have at the moment with Cornwall Council, and we have got the Dun and Bradstreet number, the Cornwall Council, they seem to have removed some of the information. And what they've done is they've replaced the information that should be there, and it looks as if the CEO and other officials are actually taken from other incorporated bodies.
So
go on.
So let me get this straight. Cornwall Council, along with other councils throughout the country, are actually incorporated entities and registered as such.
That's it.
Which means that what we think of as public servants are not public servants. They're actually behaving as though they are companies with CEOs, etc. So who is the CEO? Is it the council leader? Would the person we'd see as a council leader, is that the CEO?
No, they're hiding who the CEO is by saying that they have a rotation of CEOs which are given to them by another company. So one person in another company is nominated as the CEO, but they keep changing them around.
Okay, so what this is reminding me of is my current little bee in my bonnet, which is to find out who owns companies that I'm buying from. And that's turned out to be a Russian dolls game, where I think I'm buying a top from a Cornish company. And then I get suspicious because I see a made in China label on it. And so I find out who owns this company. And this company is owned by another company, which is owned by another company, which is owned by another company, and so on we go. And now you're telling me that this, which has become almost the norm in terms of what we see on our high streets, is actually how our local councils are running?
Yes, exactly how the local councils are running. They're acting as a incorporated business. So they have the Dun and Bradstreet numbers as if they're an incorporated business. They have a incorporated number or a limited company number on the government website. They have everything in place that they're a limited company, but they are still saying that they are a public service, which they can't be.
Okay, so I feel like my head's blowing up here because this is quite a big concept for us to get our heads around. And the obvious question that then arises is, where does the money go? So if they are collecting tax from us and they are not public servants, where is the money going?
To another limited company, which is the government. So when you asked the question, how much of the money is kept by the councils, they will tell you 100% of it is kept by the councils. So 100% of what you pay is kept by the councils. But in actual fact, it's 100% of the amount that the government allocates to them. So all of your council tax is paid into a central fund, which the government then allocates back to your local councils. From what we can gather at the moment, that's somewhere between 9 and 11%. Let's say 10% on average. Somewhere around that figure is what goes to the councils. The rest of it goes to a central government fund, and there lies the problem.
Okay, so I assume that this is what's known as a consolidated fund.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the money goes into this consolidated fund that is run by central government. 10 to 11% of that money comes back to local councils. So how much say do councils actually have in the way that money is allocated by central government? So in terms of how it's spent. So government says, okay, here's 10, 11%. Are there strings attached to that money? Are they told this is how you must spend this money? Or do councils create their own budgets and have any say in how that money is spent?
Councils create their own budgets. They apply to the central government for the money to do that, and the government will actually say, yes, you can have this, or no, you can't have that amount. But there is a negotiation which goes on there. What we're not told is how much actually goes to the central fund and how much comes out of the central fund and goes back to the councils again. From putting out requests, subject access requests to different councils, we've actually come up with a figure that's somewhere around 10%, give or take a percent. Somewhere around that figure is what goes back to the councils.
So there are lots of obvious questions when we consider that this is the way things are being run. Number one, what is the purpose of local elections if councils are operating A, as businesses, and B, are not really making meaningful decisions about the money?
Mm-hmm. They're not making any meaningful decisions whatsoever. Why are we electing them? That's the question. We shouldn't be.
Right. Well, then the next obvious question is, given that this isn't a public service as such that we contribute to and get something out of, we know the shocking state of our public services. Is there an actual legal obligation to pay our council tax?
None whatsoever. We've got to understand here that if they are a incorporated business, a limited company, they operate under the rules of an incorporated company, which means that the only way they can demand money out of you is to contract with you. What they're trying to say is that, well, initially things have changed recently. Initially, they said the Local Government Finance Act of 1992 was their authority to place an obligation on you. So you had no choice in the matter. But in actual fact, it's not, because if you look at the Local Government Finance Act of 1992, it instructs the councils to collect money, but it doesn't say how, when, where, or why. So it's giving a very loose instruction to the councils. It's up to the councils to negotiate with us, but they don't. They try to use that as a way of saying, no, we are allowed to place obligation on you. The only person that can place an obligation is not person, that's Lucent. The only entity that can place an obligation on any person on this earth is the creator, God, whoever you want to call him, that's the only person that can do that. Everybody else, nobody is under the law. All are equal under the law. You cannot place an obligation on anyone else without consent.
Is that a legal statement that you've just made?
Yes.
So this legal statement that you've just made, that nobody has an obligation, nobody is allowed to place an obligation upon us.
Yeah.
We don't have a constitution as such. Where is this?
We don't need a constitution. A constitution restricts you. If you've got a constitution, it's in black and white. This is a document that's been produced and you have to follow it exactly. You need 80%, a majority of 80% of the population to change a constitution. We do not want a constitution because it just binds you down.
Okay.
What we're talking about is these are businesses and they have to follow contract law.
Okay. So, all right. And so under that system, nobody can put a legal obligation upon us because it's contractual law, and therefore both parties have to agree, which means that both parties must know the terms and conditions under which the contract is framed. And given that most of us have been operating under the illusion that our governments, local and central, were public services whom we elected and were not companies, I can see a problem here that one party is not informed of the terms and conditions of the contract. Okay, so backtracking a little bit and thinking about this idea of obligation. Is there a moral obligation for us to be paying tax?
Not a moral obligation for us to pay tax because they're supplying services which we may or may not want to do. It's actually slightly more complicated than that. I'm trying to keep it as simple as I possibly can here. But we have judicial law, we have contract law, we have common law. And common law is not a separate thing because all the laws that we know are built on top of common law. And we have natural law, which is the overriding factor of all things. Do no harm. Keep the peace. You only need to remember those two things. Everything else, they say four things, but everything else is do no harm. What we need to do, here go the hands again. I'm just going to sit on them a minute. What we've got to remember is that we have a duty not to do harm. And you've got to go back to that one. Now, if the councils say, look, if you don't pay this money, then you are doing harm because you're not contributing to the services which we supply. But at the same time, they've got to say which services they supply and how much it costs. That's something they're not willing to do. And if they're not willing to do that, are they committing fraud?
See, that's the thing, isn't it? Is that we don't get an itemized bill.
No.
We just get a demand, basically. We don't get an itemized bill. And so we have no idea how much of our tax money is being spent on local services. And from what is spent on local services, we have no idea how contracts between them and service providers are acquired. Are they the best fit? Are they doing due diligence in terms of looking for the best deal? We have absolutely no idea. Everything is done in the background under closed doors, and we never see this. We never see the itemized bill. And I can't think of a single situation in which I get bills that I pay that are not itemized.
The best way I can explain this is simply, I cut you off then, sorry. The
No,
best
no.
way, the best way I can explain this is I walk into a supermarket and the manager of the supermarket comes up to me and says, okay, thank you for coming here and shopping. You have to buy one of every single item on every single shelf in every single aisle, and then you can go back out again. And I say, hold on, I came in for a loaf of bread and a tin of baked beans. I'm not shopping here. And you walk out again. Apply that to the council, and they are saying to you, you have to buy one of every single item that we provide, every single service we provide, but we're not actually going to tell you what the price is.
Okay, so yes, but I can hear the argument that says, yeah, but if we just allow everybody to pick and choose what services they're paying for, they're only going to suit themselves. And therefore, things like education might suffer because not everybody has children, or some people want to send their children to private school. So we need everybody to be pitching in for all the services so that we can actually fund all of them.
Mm-hmm. Right, now you've got to go back a little bit again, because we've worked out that around about 10%, can be less, but around about 10% of the money that we pay in council tax actually goes to the council. Now that, on average, would be around between 130 and 150 pounds per year. I don't mind that. I'm happy to pay that. Where's the rest of the money going? And it's the rest of the money that I object to, because if they're saying, no, you've got to pay 10 times that amount, where's all that going?
Yes, and there is another factor, which is the salaries of council workers. Now, I'm not begrudging anyone a salary. However, I think that most people would agree that people who are supposed to be public servants and who are being paid by the public should A, be public servants and serve the public, and B, not be on extraordinary salaries and pension funds, which we see is the norm at this, particularly in the higher echelons of councils. So there is a question here about that. But there is something else, which I've been hearing people say, and that is to actually pay council tax is far from being the moral thing to do, but is actually immoral.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it immoral to pay to contribute to your society? Because after all, okay, we're talking about council tax and we're objecting it to it going to central government. Why would we object to it going to central government? I mean, they keep the country afloat, don't they?
No. This is the other problem that you've got again. Now, if you go to, I think it's 2000, a certain act in 2000, which lays out the problems with giving money to terrorist organizations. So they've got certain definitions in there which are terrorist, what they consider a terrorist organization to be. And under international law, if you attack, for instance, a country without any provocation on their side, you cannot do that. You can only fight another country if they attack you. How many wars have happened where we have gone in and attacked another country without provocation? They've got to attack you first. Now, the Falklands was a good example of that, where Argentinians attacked us and tried to take back the Falkland Islands because it was our protectorate. So that it becomes part of us and they attacked it. So we have a duty to retaliate. But that doesn't give us a duty. It only gives us a duty to kick them out. It doesn't give us a duty to go in and invade that country. Because once we've taken out the threat, we can't go on past that. That's international law.
So this is about proportional response.
Proportional response. Yeah.
So we are allowed to act in self-defense, obviously, but the response must be proportional. And so we have within living memory, definitely as a country engaged in warfare that's outside of that remit. And I would imagine, I think that if we are asked for help by another country, such as we were in Kuwait in the 90s, then that was, what was that, 91, that we went in to help Kuwait, that would have been acceptable. And we got Iraq out, and that was the end of the matter. That was proportionate. But everything else with dodgy dossiers, etc., has been illegal.
Yeah, dodgy dossiers is just about right. It is. We have, when you talk about this, if you talk about the definition that we're not allowed to do that, then on the Second Gulf War, even if you just take that one, the government were acting as a terrorist organization to their own definition. This is not anything else. This is their own definition. So by their own definition, they are a terrorist organization. Now, if we suspect, you and I suspect that we are dealing with a terrorist organization, we cannot give money to them. What's the taxes? We're paying taxes to these people, which they're using then for warfare. We can't do that. And the reason, even if we suspect that they are terrorists, we cannot give money to them. That's how the act works.
So I can see a lot of people groaning and kind of, eyes, rolling their eyes, thinking, oh yeah, here we go, But actually, this is fundamental, because what it's highlighting is the lack of say that we as individuals have about how our hard-earned money is spent by those who are in authority. So this is fundamental. And what your argument is, it is, no, we're okay to pay this. We want to know where it's going, how it's being spent, and it needs to be fair. So, okay, let's imagine that an individual decides, you know what, I'm done with this. There's no accountability for the way in which my hard-earned money is being spent. I am struggling to pay the bills as it is. And meanwhile, my local council leader has got a hefty salary on my back and the back of everybody else. The potholes are not being mended. Schools, well, let's just say that we're not all entirely happy with the quality of the education that our children are receiving. The health system is falling apart. I'm done. And now I have to consider that on top of everything else, there's just this possibility that the money that I honestly earn, and by the way, we're all subject to all sorts of money laundering restrictions, and let's call them impertinences. And yet it appears that our government may be in breach of international law, putting it by its own definition in situations where they would be deemed as a terrorist organization. I'm done. So let's imagine this individual saying, well, I'm done. How can they say, do you know, I now want to withdraw from this contract? How do they do that? How do they quit the contract?
Right. You can't withdraw from a contract you've never signed. So there is no contract in the first place. Second thing is, you go back to natural law now. If by withdrawing from that you harm other people, so your local services, for instance, if you harm other people, then you're going against natural law. So what you have to think of is, okay, I've got to give them a chance here. So each year the council sends me a demand. Each year I send them a letter back saying, thank you for your invite to contract with you. I can't accept it, unfortunately, not in its current terms. But if you can send me a list of what the services you supply, plus the costs as they equate to me, then I will choose which services I want to contribute to. Okay, because some of these, they're claiming that they're contributing towards the police. I'm not sure about that, because the police get their own funds, and the police are supplied money by local central government again. So how can the local government say that I'm contributing to the constabulary? I would leave that one out. And there's probably a few other ones that I would leave out there as well that are a little bit on the dodgy side. So having chosen what I want, then if they come back to me and say, okay, that's fine, here's the amount of money that you will have to pay in conjunction with those. If I was only paying maybe £130 a year, I might just let it slide and say, okay, right, yeah, I'll give you the £130 a year because that's what I estimate that I should be paying. But they won't do that. They won't talk to you. They won't contract with you in any way whatsoever. And they try then to say, and this is where the fraud comes in. Because at that point they say, no, you must do it. You must pay. If they say you must pay, what is your grounds for saying that I must pay? How can you put obligation onto me? They will go through a certain amount of things. Now, one is the Local Government Finance Act of 1992. That one has already been rebutted. Any person where they claim that that's their authority comes from, we have a rebuttal for that one, they just send it in. At that point, they've got to answer all the questions on that rebuttal. If they don't, that our rebuttal stands. And therefore that local council now can't claim that that's their authority. So what they do now is they claim something else, which is their own rules and regulations for their operation, which is not, which can't put an obligation on you. That's just how they are supposed to act. So they're coming up with all these excuses that say they can place an obligation on you to pay. That in itself is fraudulent. Then they have these courts, which are not courts. These things are not courts at all. They're tribunals. So they have they form these tribunals, and then they say, right, we have brought a liability order against you. What's a liability order? Well, I don't know. What is a liability order? They're saying that there is a liability that they perceive that I have to pay for my home, my house, whatever I'm living in. So they've created that liability. But again, have I said that I would like to pay that because that's my liability? No, I haven't. It's come out without a contract again. So all these things come into play, and the fraud is what they try to make you perceive is your obligation, and none of that actually is. They then send an agent, because people call them bailiffs, but they're not. They send an agent to your door that says, you owe money to the council. So then you talk to the agent and say, right, okay, what's the proof that I owe money to the council? Well, we have a liability order here. Okay, show me the liability order. They can't because they haven't got one. If they show you a tablet with something written on it, okay, what is this? It's a picture of something. If I put a picture of my my driving license, let's say, on my phone, and a policeman said, can I see your driving license? And I say, there you go, there's a picture of it. Are they going to accept that? No. If I have my passport on my phone and I show the border control my passport on my phone, are they going to accept it? No, they're not. You can't accept a picture. You have to have the original documents. So they can't give you that either. So no, wait a minute, they can't prove that there is a contract between you. I'm not talking about just a contract. There is some sort of liability that can create that. They're not trying to prove that. They're not giving you the original documents themselves. If you owed money to somebody and that person, because of a contract, let's say your rent. So you stop paying your rent, the landlord then is taken you to court. The courts, the high courts, then issue a document which is sent to you. You then have at least a minimum of 7 days to verify that those documents are correct or to appeal against it. And then after that, if you say nothing at all, then an agent comes to your door, a bailiff comes to your door and has the ability then, because they have a high court writ or something similar, which says they can take charge of your goods. That's where it starts the legal process coming in. The councils don't do any of that. Somebody turns up at your door. Now, where did they get that information from? The council must have passed it on. What laws are they breaching now? If they're breaching laws all the way down the line. So when it comes to us, who are, you know that we're all signed up to natural law. And the natural law says that we mustn't do any harm, we mustn't commit any fraud. Now, there you've got to stop, because if we pay somebody who's fraudulent, we commit fraud ourselves, because we're supporting fraud. So when it comes to moral obligations, our moral obligation is to say, no, stop committing fraud and enter into a proper contract with us. And if they don't do that, we shouldn't be paying at all until they stop acting fraudulent.
Okay, so I think we need to make a distinction between the courts, the different types of courts that are being used here. So the issue is that local councils are not able to produce legal liability orders because it's not a high court that's actually producing it. Well, who is and why is it that it's not a high court producing it?
It doesn't have to be a high court, it can be a magistrate's court, but it has to be a court of records of some sort. It has to be within the legal system. That's their own system. What they're doing is they are saying, they're printing out all these liability orders. They're not even doing that. They're actually creating these liability orders online. And those are then, from what we can see, they are then put into an information service, which people like that have got agents, which are collection agents, and they come to your door and try to collect the money off of you. So they're actually giving away your information as well, which is breaking.
This is a data breach as well.
It is, yeah.
So it's not an actual court that is acting. So when people are summoned to a court, is it a court they're being summoned to? Because you use the word tribunal. So what's the difference?
Okay, well, a tribunal, anybody can set up a tribunal, really, because what they're trying to do is to say, you can put your side of it, they can put their side of it, and then we can decide who is in the right and who is in the wrong. And banks can set up banking tribunals and so on. These are not courts. They call them magistrates' courts, but they're not. They're not courts of record. They've just set up this for their own benefit, and that's where it doesn't work. A court is impartial. They have to examine and look at both sides. They can't rubber stamp the perceptions of the council. They can't rubber stamp.
So these courts are being run by the council rather than by an actual legal court, which means that their job is basically to find you guilty before you've even arrived.
No, they don't even find you guilty. They just don't accept anything that you put in front of them.
Right. So that's that. So there is no discussion here
No.
So this, I think some would say a show trial.
Yeah, I don't even like the word court, trial, or anything else. It's purely and simply a rubber stamping exercise that they're doing. So that's where, to my mind, the fraud really kicks in, because
Okay.
they're trying to make you think that you have an obligation when you don't.
So, okay, so they are working to make us feel that we have an obligation. They're putting us under an obligation when we haven't signed a contract. And then there's the fact that we think that the money is being used in one way and we have no idea how the money is being used at all. So there are some very serious issues here for anyone watching to consider. If people wanted to find out more about this issue, John, how do they do that?
Well, they can tackle us about it. I mean, we're going into this hook, line, and sinker at the moment. I mean, we've looked at all the laws that are open to us at the moment. Now, when I was talking about, they are not a court, okay? There is the Local Government Act of 1888, and it clearly states this act shall not authorize any county council or any committee or member thereof to exercise any of the powers of a court of record. Remember, I talked about courts of record again. To exercise any jurisdiction under the Summary Jurisdiction Acts or perform any judicial business or otherwise act as justices or justices of the peace. That's 1888. That's going back a long way. They've never had any rights to do any of this. So they've disregarded everything and they're just going their own way. Yes, we've done all this. We've got people within the community assemblies. We've got we've got separate teams of people for doing separate things, and we've got teams of people that are looking into this completely. We've got the Marc Horn of the peacekeeper, and boy, what that boat doesn't know is a point. He's absolutely terrific. He's one of the businesses that we cooperate. Cars, I'm just, yes, I forgot to switch it off. Okay, that's your next interview, by the way. That's Nick Kitchen. So the problem that we have with all of this is the way that they're actually behaving, and such as Marc Horn, when you've got people such as Dave Bayliss, they're all coming in and lending their expertise to what we're doing. We've got 8 different corporations or companies, operations working together with us to make sure that people get the right information. None of us is running anything. We operate in cooperation together.
Yeah.
And this is the only way it can be really done, is to get that amount of expertise into one place.
Well, this is great because you've given lots of people plenty of food for thought. Now, I know that the assemblies operate on a basis that it's free. However, as we know in life, bills do have to be paid. So I know that you're looking for people to support your work through donations. If people want to give a donation, John, how do they do that?
There's 2 ways of doing it. One, they can go online to the community assemblies of the British Isles, and there is a part there where you can go to donations and you can donate once off, or you can set up a monthly amount. We like the monthly amounts bits because it gives us a budget. That's one way of doing it. The second way to do it is to, once they've joined the community assemblies, they can write to me and they can ask for the bank details correct, and then they don't pay any commission. So they can put the money direct into our bank account. I'm happy to do that.
Good.
2 ways of doing it, 2 lots of money coming in. I'm afraid when you come to the people that are doing the transactions for it, if it goes through any other account, then they take their money out of it as well. But sometimes that's the only way that people want to do it.
Yeah, so the website is there as an option, but putting money directly into the account is the most cost-effective way for all parties.
Yeah,
So thank you, John.
thank you.
And
And when we getting together again?
when are we getting together? Well, let's. And I don't think we're going to leave it too long, are we, John?
No, probably not. We always find something to talk about, don't we?
we we must find something to talk about always. Thank you very much for your time today.
And thank you. Thanks for having me here.
And thank you all for watching. Now, coming up in future interviews, we're going to be looking at the Light Brigade and hopefully very soon the Peacekeepers. Until then, goodbye.